Courtney Morse, Natural Wellness Physiotherapy. We're talking about week 2 of our deadlift series. We're going to talk about activation of our core and engagement of our lats. Last time we were talking about proper setup, and if you have questions about those, we'll link those to the video below. That's a really good place for us to start on our deadlift. We're talking about barbell deadlift. This time we're going to talk about why we need to be keeping our core engaged and why we need to be incorporating our lats. If we think about our core, and the technical term is our Valsalva maneuver, right? If we contract all of these muscles and we get our core and we're increasing our intra-abdominal pressure here, the reason that we want to do that is that if we think about like a bottle of pop, right? If I shake that pop up really, really hard and I unscrew the lid, all that pressure goes away, okay? If we think about our core the same way, and if we're bracing and we're creating that tension, cool, that tension is going to help support our spine and help support all of our tissues through here. If I let go of that tension, now I don't have that same amount of abdominal pressure that's going to help support my spine, right? So the very first thing that we want to do before we lift and before we pull this thing up off the ground is that you can either take that breath at the top and go down, or you can start it down through here. But we're thinking about pulling our rib cage in and getting a little bit of a tilt, but mainly keeping those core pressures tight, okay? And that's going to help prevent injury and it rooting out that weakest tissue and exploiting that, okay? The second thing that we're going to talk about is going to be lat activation, okay? This is one that we see a lot of time, and we hear this cued 100 different ways, and a lot of times we still see this error, okay? So if I'm around my bar, I've got my good setup, the next thing that I want to do is I want to think about like having $200 bills stuck in between each side of my armpit, okay? And what I want to do is I want to squeeze my armpits as I'm getting ready to pull this thing up. If I don't, the first thing that we're going to see happens is this, right? And now I'm in that bad rounded position from the get-go, okay? If I can squeeze my armpits tight, then I have all of this good activation of these big, powerful muscles. That's gonna help keep my spine in place, okay? So if we're thinking about two things in terms of activation this time, we're talking about, Valsalva maneuver, like pushing out against our belt if we're wearing one because it's heavy, and B, activating those muscles back through here. The other thing you'll notice this week is I am barefoot. We don't want to have a lot of cushion between our foot and the floor, especially if we're doing deadlift. The other thing that we want to possibly think about doing is creating some midline stability by rotating our feet and kind of squeeze and separating the floor beneath us to create some stability in our lower extremities. So those are the three things that we want to think about before we go and do a heavy deadlift. Next week we're going to actually talk about moving the weight up and down through the ranges of motion. So stick around for next week. If you have any questions, drop them below and we'll be happy to answer them. So until next time, Courtney Morse, Natural Wellness Physiotherapy.